Excellencies. You've talked about there was one very interesting uh, thing that you talked about, India's export trends, which he is very proud of, and what he has projected in that.
May I
Yes,
explain that
yes,
a bit?
please, yes.
I think, you know, when my father did his PhD in 1964, he already had a certain view of the Indian economy. He already had certain ideas about how to take the country forward. But he, in the early 70s, in 71, he joined the government. And it was, I think, his effort to work within the system. He's a very strong believer in uh, working within the system to make the system stronger. Uh, uh, and so whatever improvements he thought should be made, he tried to do them at his level. And obviously, and there were many, many people who were also trying to do the same thing. It's not like, you know, he was the only one. So change from within, this was the pattern that I think continued right through the 70s. So it was bit by bit, little by little. And then the pace picked up in the 80s. But I think what happened was, in his case, there was a break when he left the government of India in 87. And he went, he was working in the South Commission, which was a commission that looked at all developing countries. And that was when he realized with sort of startling clarity that India was way behind other developing countries. You know, we were used to talking about, you know, the developed West and, you know, India, you know, where are we? Where do we stand? But he could see so clearly that China, that you know, East Asia, all these countries were surging ahead, and we were just getting left behind. And that was the point in time. It was really 87 to 90 or 91 when he changed his view. You know, his view was not do little by little, do it slowly, do it from within. So when he came back to India in 1990, his view was throw the system out, you know, change the system. This is not going to work. Doing things slowly is not going to work. You've got to do it quickly, you've got to do it radically. So I think the reforms of the economic reforms of 1991 were throwing out the system. And they were very, very radical. And I think that they essentially changed, the way the economy was structured, the way the economy functions. And these were long-term changes. The things have not been the same ever since. And at that time, these changes were brought about by a minority government. The Congress, under Prime Minister Narasimha Rao, did not have a majority in parliament, but they were able to make these radical changes. And after them, in 96, you had a different government. There were different parties. I think there were elections again in 98. There were a different set of parties in government, and again in 1999. So the changes that came in during 1991 survived not just the Congress government, but a whole range of governments. No government has thought it necessary or advisable or possible to change what was put in place in 1991. And I think that is perhaps one of his greatest reasons to be satisfied with what he has done over the years.
Yeah, in fact, taking off from what you were talking about the earlier, speaking of the South dialogue, you know, he had talked about exactly as you said, the countries, how the countries of East Asia actually did not bother about the inequities of the global system. And your father felt that if we had followed it, you know, we somehow wanted, we felt differently from them. But if we had followed it, and we had followed the East Asian countries, we would have, like China particularly, carved out a more important role for ourselves in the working of the international system. Because he said that at that point, China took off and became the manufacturing hub of the world. But if we had followed those systems, then perhaps we wouldn't have had to wait till a much later time. And then, of course, we go into 1991, the liberalization years after that. That is another part of the story which I think has excited all of us to get out of controls and so on. Also, I wanted to ask you about things like the stock market scam and the fact that your father didn't resign after that. You know, these things, there were many points in time in his tenure when maybe he felt that he should resign, but he didn't. And you have also said that just a resignation does not mean that you can change the system.
You know, my father has a very bad habit of resigning all the time. We always tease him about it, you know. I mean, he resigned when, I think the first time he resigned was when he was a professor in Punjab University, and he wanted to go and work in the UN, so he resigned. And then the vice chancellor said, there's no need to resign. Take your resignation back. Just go on leave. So that was the first time. He's actually resigned.
Wonderful. They wanted him. He went on leave, but they kept the position open for him.
Yeah, they kept it open for him. Anyway, so he worked in the UN, then he came back and he joined Delhi School of Economics, and then he got an offer from government. So then he said, okay, to Delhi School of Economics, I resign. And so again, the vice chancellor said, look, please don't resign, you know, just go on leave, go on deputation. So he hung on. But a few years later, he told the vice chancellor, look, now I am absolutely certain I don't want to come back to the university, so don't keep my position open. Please fill it. Please accept my resignation, and they did. In 1971, he had a difference of opinion with his Minister of Commerce, and he said, here, I resign. So at that time, the principal secretary to the Prime Minister heard of this and said, please don't resign. We'll shift you out of that ministry. Leave the Ministry of Commerce, come to Ministry of Finance. So he went. So, I mean, I can go on. He's always been resigning. We are quite used to it. As finance minister, he was ready to resign at the drop of the hat. And I'm going to tell you a funny story here. I met somebody while I was working on this book. And he said, that you may not know this, but he has a daughter called Aditi. So while my father was finance minister, he was again always threatening to resign every now and then. And he did actually submit his resignation. I'll tell you about that if you wish. Yes, but I prefer this story. So this Aditi, who was then 12 or 13 years old, she was reading the papers, and it really bothered her that he's always talking about resigning. So she wrote him a letter. Dear finance minister, why don't you stop? I don't remember the exact thing, but to the effect was, why don't you stop threatening to resign and actually do some work? Why don't you do your job? So apparently my father got this letter and he replied. And he apologized for constantly offering to resign. And he said, yes, you are right. I have a job to do, and I should do it. And I promise you that I will do so. And so this letter came home. And that's when the parents saw it, and they got the shock of their lives that, what is our daughter been doing corresponding with the finance minister? So yes, basically, this is his history. He has always been willing to resign. In this particular case, there was a stock market scam in 1992. And he did not feel that he had done anything wrong. So when the opposition kept, sort of clamoring for his resignation, he did not resign. And he said, I agree that there are defects in the system, and I agree that this scam is a result of the weaknesses in the system, but I have not created those weaknesses. In fact, I have been working to overcome those weaknesses. But then there was a JPC, a Joint Parliamentary Committee, and that report said that although the finance minister as an individual uh, is not responsible for this scam, he is, after all, the finance minister, and he should take what is called constructive responsibility. So when this report came out in 93, I think, so my father immediately sent in his resignation, and he went home, and he sat at home. And basically, for 1 week, nothing happened. The Prime Minister did not comment. My father did not comment. There were media people camping outside the house. They had no idea what was going on. And the stock market was sort of falling lower and lower and lower, and nobody knew what was going to happen. And then on the 8th day or so, the Prime Minister, Narasimha Rao, just sent his letter of resignation back. So that was an indication that your resignation is not accepted. So it's really history repeated itself yet again. He resigned, and he was told, no, forget about resigning, just get back, do your job. So that's the story of that resignation.
Thank God he didn't, because there was so much work to be done about nation-building activities. You have a wonderful, wonderful chapter on which says an idea whose time had come. And in that, one of the things he says, and you quote from him, is, our nation-building activities and departments have been starved of resources because of our excessive preoccupation with the commanding heights, with the so-called commanding heights. I will say with all due respect that in today's world, it is not steel which is at the commanding height of the economy. It is knowledge which is going to determine our nation's future. And that knowledge base is what you must build upon. That is one of the things. I've been just trying to take out a few nuggets of what he has been saying. There is also something you have quoted. It is a popular story in the press that Manmohan Singh had been mysteriously transformed from a meek, mild civil servant to an aggressive advocate of radical change. And some people attributed this transformation to his alleged sellout to Western capitalism. And he very firmly refuted this. Couple of lines which I'll read out to you. When I came to the finance ministry in '71, I wrote a paper called What to Do with Victory. I had written at that time that all these controls in the name of socialism would not lead to growth, but would strangle the impulses for growth. I used to be in favor of gradual change. This country will be marginalized if we don't move forward at a breathtaking pace. I'm convinced that if there has to be structural change, it has to be done quickly. And I think we are soon going to see the beginning of a glorious chapter in the history of India. That was a very long answer, but I've taken a bit out of it. But I think it was a wonderful way that he silenced some of the critics. But to go back to your personal lives, I think we've talked so much about the Prime Minister, but I think we should talk about your mother. And I think I'd like you to tell us a little about how music was a very, very integral part of her life, and how she really could have been a musician in her own right. But I think she stood back a little and gave in to the fact that she had to be the Prime Minister's wife, or the wife of someone who was going from Oxford to Cambridge, or Cambridge to Oxford, to New York, to Geneva. And she had to be the family person. But yet, don't you think if she had the chance, she could have blossomed even more? As far as music goes, In every other way, she was a wonderful, strong individual.
Well, my mother has always been interested in. She's always, from a very early age, enjoyed singing, and she sort of excelled in school and in college. And when she was doing her BA, she actually started learning classical music, light classical music, and it was really her, the thing that gave her the most pleasure, I think, in life. And soon after, she also started singing on radio. She didn't do very many programs, but she did a couple. Um, but over the years, I think her she was not able to keep up with her training. And as you know, in classical music, it is a very intensive uh, training process. You know, it's not like doing a course in computers or something. I mean, it's really, you have to uh, give it a lot of dedicated, committed time on a regular basis, year after year after year. And that's something she just couldn't afford to do because, firstly, she got married. And within a year, my